Welcome to Thriving Through, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on the world of independent consulting and shows you exactly what you need to do to build a successful consulting practice. I'm AJ, I'm your host, and each week I dive deep into the real life stories of self-employed consultants who have transformed their expertise into thriving businesses. Now, this isn't about glossy success stories or overnight miracles. This is about the grit, the strategies, and the resilience it takes to build a consulting practice that is not only financially rewarding, but also personally fulfilling. From navigating the feast or famine cycle to landing dream clients, from managing the unique challenges of entrepreneurship to creating systems that support your business, I'm covering it all. Each episode features a candid conversation with consultants who've been where you are. We share their stories, their insights, and the hard-earned lessons that transform their business into a thriving practice. So whether you're just starting out, looking to level up as a consultant, or wanting to reignite your passion for consulting, this podcast is for you. It's your weekly dose of inspiration, insight, and strategies that will pump you up and motivate you for the rest of the week. So grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and get ready to learn, get inspired, and most importantly, to thrive. Welcome to this episode of the Thriving Through podcast. Today, my guest is Kit Brown-Hoekstra with Comgenesis, and I'll let her explain a little bit about what her company is and her journey into self-employed consulting. So Kit, tell us a little bit about how long you've been in consulting, how you got into it, and a little bit about what kind of service you provide to your clients.
All right. Thanks for having me, AJ. My journey, I sort of got into consulting by accident. I wanted to be a veterinarian, didn't get into vet school, and then one of my professors said, oh, my buddy in the journalism department starting this graduate program in technical communication, and you'd be perfect because you're a good writer. And I was like, great, what's TechCom? And somehow he let me in, the guy let me in, and the rest, as they say, is history. So I worked as a technical writer for some pacemaker manufacturer and a couple of other companies, software companies and things like that. And then worked for Lionbridge for a couple of years, which is a localization company. And then when I got laid off in the dot-com bubble burst back in 2000, or 2002, actually, I took a couple months off and decided that I really liked doing the consulting that I'd been doing on behalf of Lionbridge. And so I started doing the same thing with my own clients, and I just haven't looked back since then. I've written a couple of books. I speak at a lot of conferences and that kind of thing. What I do is I help global companies design and build content systems so that they can better serve their customers wherever they live and work in whatever language they prefer.
And is that what you mean by the term localization?
So localization is part of content. Well, localization, people might consider it separate from content, but it's part of the content strategy and content operations. Localization is taking content and products that are created in one culture and language and making it so that it's acceptable to another culture and language. So it includes translation, but it also includes regulatory, it includes cultural, that kind of stuff. So that's
So
what
you do a piece of it. You do the content piece.
I do. I do the connecting the content, basically the flow through, helping the content flow through the system all the way to localization. Yeah.
Okay. Who is your ideal client? Who do you serve?
My ideal client, if I could pick a client, would be a medical or biotech company, medium sized to enterprise level, who is getting ready to either change content management systems or moving from a less good content system to another, going from unstructured to structured content, that kind of thing. I do a lot of work with companies that are trying to merge two companies into one, and they need to consolidate the systems and figure out processes and style guides and all of that good stuff. And I also do a lot of training to teach my clients how to work with localization people. Sometimes I work with localization companies when they have a particular client that needs help. So yeah.
Okay, cool. What problems do you solve for your clients?
I help them communicate more effectively so that they can connect with their customers. So um the content that a company creates is how their customers experience the company in many ways. And so having that unified experience of the content. So if it's a big company like Microsoft or um, GE or something like that, every business unit has its own content team and its own processes and things like that. But to the customer, it seems very just disjointed, right? So my job is to go in and help unify that experience using the content and help develop more efficient operations and strategies so that they can serve up the content in whatever format they need, to the right audience at the right time in the right format and the right amount is
Okay,
basically the mantra. That's the ideal.
say your I help statement again.
I help global companies design and build content systems so that they can better serve their customers wherever they live and work in whatever language they live and work in. And that includes content strategy, content operations, content engineering, localization strategy, project management.
I love the fact that you have such a well-defined definition of what you do.
Thanks.
I can tell, I would guess that you put a lot of work into that because it sounds very clean and simple, but it was probably not at all clean and simple to craft.
It took a long time to really get it nailed down. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's one of the biggest pieces of advice I give people just starting out is understand your why. Why do you why do you want to exist as a consulting company? Or, if you're building a product, why do you want to exist as a company? What is your purpose for being? And once you know that and you can clarify that and say it very succinctly, then it really helps people know where to put you, right?
Right, right. Because people have to know where to put you.
Right.
That's what people do. Yeah,
And
yeah,
the tagline for my company, this is my big, hairy, audacious goal, is communication for a connected world.
beautiful.
Because we change the world by doing our jobs.
How do you know when, or how did you know when you came up with that I help statement or that positioning statement? How did you know when it resonated, when it was the right one?
When That's a hard question because it's evolved over time. But when I have clients who come to me, just they see an article I've written or a public, saw me present at a conference or something, and they're like, okay, I need help with that. And so They want to, they want to make sure that their content is getting to the right people and at the right time and all of that. And so they know that they can come and talk to me.
Okay. So you know it resonates with them because they respond.
Right. They
Yeah.
come to me. I will admit to until recently not really doing a lot of marketing.
And we'll go into that a little bit more. But what I oh, I just had a thought and it completely fleeted out of my mind. Oh well.
That's all right.
uh anyway, when we talked earlier, a week or so ago, you mentioned that you raised your prices when business was slow. That sounds so counterintuitive. Could you walk us through that, why that counterintuitive approach worked, and maybe share a little of the psychology behind it if you could?
Well, that was a piece of advice that one of my mentors, whose name is Chris Juliet, he did some presentations about how to start your own business and stuff like that. And it is very counterintuitive. However, it works because when you start valuing yourself more, then people start valuing you more. So it's a confidence thing. And also, if everyone that you're interfacing with in a business development situation is not even blinking at your prices, you're probably not asking enough. Because,
Right.
right? And
Mhm.
if with the type of contracts that I do, um, I'm working with that company for a year or two on a bunch of different, sometimes smaller it's like an overarching project, but it's different POs over time. And once you get in there, it's really hard to change your pricing. So is the key is, especially with new clients, is if you feel like you need to raise your prices, do it with a new client first and then see how that plays out. And then if you've worked with somebody for a couple of years, of course, they're going to understand if you're like, well, things have changed and I need to raise my prices a little bit, um, up to a point. And it helps if you're not doing it, not getting pay for play, where you're not working on an hourly rate. It's easier to do that price raise more organically, right?
Right. Because your project cost just goes up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or your estimate is different. And a lot of what I do is very fuzzy. So, uh, if it's if the pricing is, flat fee, um, and then I realized that I didn't make enough money off of that project because of scope creep or because the parameters weren't well enough defined at the beginning of the project, whatever, then I'm gonna the next time raise my price so that I
Right.
can make the money that I need to, because you deserve to make, as a consultant, you deserve to make money too. In fact, that's money's just a form of energy, right? So,
Yes. It's such an important point what you said about, that part of charging what you're worth rather than charging what you that negative judgmental voice in your head is telling you deserve to charge, but charging what you're worth is an important confidence thing. And it's a pitfall that I see a lot of new self-employed consultants fall into, of, oh, I can't charge any more than that, you know I'm not credible. So tell me about the confidence piece and how you kind of overcame that. Or did you have any of those judgmental thoughts in your head that were telling you weren't worth what you thought you were?
I think everybody has those thoughts when they first start out. But again, and I go back to advice that Chris gave me. Um, because he did a session at one of our industry conferences about um, estimating when you're going from being a captive employee to being a freelancer. He made the point that you need to think about money differently and time differently. And if you can pay someone less than what you're charging on an hourly rate to do some onerous task that you don't like, why are you not paying them? Right? So when you're thinking of, and I think the mistake that a lot of new consultants make is that they are still thinking like an employee. So if I'm just going to use $100,000 because it's a nice round number. If I'm making $100,000 a year as an employee and I go off on my own, um, and I'm charging the equivalent, I'd have to do the calculation what that is as an hourly rate. But if I'm charging basically what that was as my hourly rate, I'm not charging enough, because your hourly rate at $100,000 a year, if you're just looking at your salary, you're forgetting about the 20 to 30% on top of your salary that is your benefits, right? And you're also forgetting that you're getting paid 52 weeks a year, 40 hours a week, whether you're working or not. And when you go into being self-employed, you're only getting paid when you're working. And
Yep.
because you've got to now be the chief cook and bottle washer, you may have had an admin that took care of travel arrangements and bookkeeping and things like that, for the whole team or whatever. Or even if you weren't, you got paid for that time. But now your business development time, your um, marketing time, your admin time is not paid unless you're on a retainer with a client or something. But so you have to think about how are you estimating what your minimum is to live, right? And um and then going through and adding 10% to that so that you can profit, right? And then you got to think about, they're paying for your brain.
Yep.
I've been doing this for 30 years. It maybe takes me 15 minutes to do a task that would take somebody new to the industry an hour or two, right? But I'm not charging for my time. I'm charging for they're not buying my time, they're buying my experience.
Yes. And yes, absolutely. It reminds me of a story about the consultant that goes into a factory, and the factory line has screeched to a halt and they can't figure out what's wrong. He marches in, he looks over everything, he takes out his screwdriver and tightens a screw. 5 minutes maybe.
Yep.
Then he hands the client the invoice and it's $10,000. And the client says, what, you were here 10 minutes and you're charging me $10,000? He said, I'm charging you for knowing that the screw had to be tightened. It was, your line was completely shut down. How much is that costing you? I came in and saved you tons of money because I got your line back up. What is that worth?
Right.
And yeah,
Right.
that is such an important aspect that, and a lot of consultants really do have that employee mindset when they first come into consulting. I want to
Yeah.
talk about another aspect of that. When we talked, I asked you what you would do differently or one of the mistakes you made, and you said that you didn't get a VA soon enough, or words to that effect. Tell me more about that.
Oh, yeah, having a good virtual assistant helps immensely with the administrivia that comes with running a small business. The smart thing I did was hire an accountant to do all my bookkeeping and tax stuff. I like do nothing of that other than download the information from the bank account and send it to him. Right. Um, and I hate doing accounting. So that's something, if it's a task you hate, find somebody who loves doing it and pay them to do it. Right. Same thing with a virtual assistant. There's just so much um administrivia, automation, um managing of systems that if you're trying to do it all yourself, there's just not enough hours in the day, right? And having a well-trained virtual assistant who's able to work independently and look at your systems and say, okay, I can tweak this one thing and it's going to fix like 10 other things is invaluable. And there's a lot of fractional virtual assistants who you pay them, X number of hours a month. They're not working for you full time, at least initially. And that's what I have. Right now she's working for me on a project basis. I want to get to the point of being able to pay her on an ongoing basis. But she's helping me with getting my mailing list set up, helping me with my marketing systems, doing graphic design for me when I need it. Those things that while I might be able to do them are not something I enjoy doing and not something that is really adding to the business. I mean, it's adding to the
Exactly.
business, but it's not adding. Me doing it is not adding to the business because clients are paying me for my brain of what I know about content systems, not whether or not I can get a new email newsletter out the door to the right people, you know.
Exactly. I mean, it's the focus on we as the CEOs of our companies. The focus should be on the revenue generating activities. And of course, those are the client work because you're getting directly paid for those. But they are also the marketing and sales activities that will get you more clients. So, for your example of a newsletter, a revenue generating activity for you is to write the content or maybe draft the content for the newsletter, but you shouldn't be formatting it. You shouldn't be putting it into an email and sending it to your email base. You shouldn't be dealing with any of that because it really is truly below your pay grade. And
Right.
the opportunity cost for us when we do those things is that we can't make the kind of money we want to make.
Right. And can't like I went to a networking thing 3 weeks ago. I still haven't finished going through and connecting with everybody because I don't have this is where the having a VA sooner would have really helped because my systems are not it's a case of the cobbler's children. I help companies automate their systems, and determine what needs to be automated and what should be automated. I know darn well that this is something that could very well be automated, and yet
You haven't done it.
I haven't done it because I don't have time. Because
Right.
when I'm busy with billable work, I'm focused on the client work. And when I'm marketing, I'm focused on making the connections, not setting up the systems to support the connections, right? So that's where
Right.
the VA really comes in handy is if they can take that burden off of you so that you can focus on the value added activity of connecting with people. All these cards represent this is a fake $100 bill that somebody gave me. But all these cards that people have handed me all represent different conversations, right? And to follow up on those conversations, I need to be able to write the emails that will follow up with the conversation in a non-generic way and yet be automated, right? Um, hey, it was great meeting you at X event last week. I would love to connect. Here's my scheduler. That's really all you need to say, right? To get that
Yeah.
to get that next level of connection. But to have to do that manually is, yeah. So
It's tedious.
it's tedious
Yes.
and yeah. So
So, my feeling on VAs is that there's a possibility that we may actually have more than one VA for specialties.
yeah.
Like I use Kajabi as my platform for my website and email and all of that. It's a all-in-one platform. When I want website work done, I want somebody who is expert in Kajabi.
Yeah.
I don't need them to be an expert in creating the pictures to go on there. Someone else could do that.
Yeah.
But I kind of see it. I haven't done it yet, but I kind of see having a team. Maybe someone else is expert in SEO because I don't want to have a thing to do with SEO.
Right. And so my particular the woman that the company that I contract with, the woman who owns it has people in each of those specialties. So she's kind of the operations, she's the person who does operations consulting. And then she has people who specialize in graphic design or bookkeeping or whatever the other tasks you might need, but she kind of directs them on what to do.
Oh, okay.
So she acts
Okay.
as a
So,
fractional COO in a way.
okay, great. And then she brings in other people as needed for the tasks that's brilliant because then you don't end up managing a bunch of different VAs.
Right,
You have she's you're up here as a CEO and then she's a direct report to you.
right.
Sort of if you think of the traditional org chart.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to you talked about the Jedi High Council, which is such an intriguing name. So tell us what the Jedi High Council is and why it's so important.
Well, I stole that name from Pamela Slim, who is a business coach who's famous for the book Escape from Cubicle Nation, and she's also written Body of Work and a couple of other books. She's fabulous, by the way. If you find her blog, um, I highly recommend it. She's one of the few people I follow regularly. Um,
And we'll put the links to that book and the
yeah,
blog in the show notes if anybody
okay,
wants
so
to.
I'll send that to you then. But Pamela Slim talks about this Jedi High Council, and they're basically advisors on different aspects of your business. Um, and then someone else from the National Association of Women Business Owners did a talk at the chapter in Boise when I was living there, and just starting out. And they talked about the 5 people you need in your corner when you're starting a business. And that would be a lawyer, number one, because especially when you're first starting out, you need somebody reviewing the contracts and making sure you don't make a stupid mistake. Like in the fine print of the mediation clause where it says everybody pays their own legal fees. Well, that can get really expensive. That was a $200,000 mistake I made once. So,
Uh-huh.
um, making sure that the lawyer reviews all your contracts at first. Um, and making sure that you have a banker. So somebody who, and we can get into the business line of credit thing, but somebody make friends with the person at your bank who manages the business stuff. Um, Financial planner, because you still need to plan for retirement and estate planning and all of those things. And estate planning can be a little more complicated if you're a small business owner. Um, you want to protect your heirs from having to pay lots of taxes and things like that. Let's see, lawyer, accountant. We already talked about the accountant for obvious reasons. Financial planner, banker, and an insurance agent. Because depending on what you're doing, if you're in professional services, you may be required to have professional liability, errors and omissions type insurance.
Right,
Um,
right.
at the very minimum, you need business insurance for, insuring your laptop and things like that if they get stolen or lost or whatever.
I would add that I think there's a sixth person that needs to be on that council.
Okay.
That is a coach or mentor.
Yeah, that's
A
yeah, that's a good point.
Because I was very self-sufficient, and I didn't want advice from anybody. I wanted to figure it out myself. And I look back and go, AJ, it would have been so much easier if you'd had somebody to advise you and to tell you, don't do that, or pivot a little here. And it's so easy especially when we're first starting out, to think we can't afford it.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
really easy to think we can't afford any of the Jedi High Council, but we do. We need them.
well, the banker, the financial planner, and the accountant, or the banker and the financial planner are free typically, because the financial planner is getting paid by a fee that comes from the investment vehicles that they use. The banker, that's their job. Their whole job is to help you,
Mhm.
um, figure out the right banking need, meet your banking needs. The lawyer and the accountant, you only pay when you use them, right? Um, and they save you money. Um, and the coach, you can get a coach through, well, okay, up until a couple months ago, anyway. You can get a coach through the Small Business Administration from an organization called SCORE.
Mhm.
And those are usually retired business people who just donate their time to help other business owners. And it's free. And then there's the National Association of Women Business Owners. There's um some other, there's your local Chamber of Commerce. They often have free events, then you don't necessarily have to be a member to go to them. So,
Mhm. Great, great tips for people to get the resources they need paying, without the pain of spending the money. I want to talk about, and you alluded to it. Since the pandemic, your marketing strategy has had to evolve. That before the pandemic, you didn't really have to do any marketing. It was all referral and word of mouth. What strategies have you tried? What's worked and what hasn't?
well, I'll let you know what works when it does. Um, yeah, it's interesting because strategy is such a big word, and I would have to say that I really had no strategy before the pandemic. I had more work than I could do most of the time. So I never really reached out or did any of that proactive create a newsletter, and because I didn't have ambitions of being the next Bill Gates or the next Apple or the next, even small, I next Kinsey and Associate. I had no delusions of grandeur. I just wanted to have enough money to be to pay my bills and have the lifestyle that I wanted. Um, and that worked really well until about halfway through the pandemic. And then the work started drying up a little bit. And so I started looking at how can I how can I get more proactive about my marketing? Because the other problem with my particular industry is that the sales cycle is sometimes 18 months to 5 years.
Yeah.
I've actually had somebody come to me 5 years after I wrote an article and ask me to do a workshop for them. I'd totally forgotten about the article. It'd been so long, but apparently it
Mhm.
was through some old magazines and found it. So at a time when he needed it, right? So that's not really a great way to like keep the cash flow even.
Yeah, through that.
So I've been looking at doing more and most of my work is B2B, so business to business. Um and I've been looking at how might I take my expertise and do more open, like I do workshops all the time for clients. What if I did those as public workshops, just more made more generic? Because the ones I do for the clients are obviously they're customized for their particular needs. But what if I started trying to give workshops on various topics, ranging from technical communication localization to conscious leadership to, how to build your dream home without going crazy, what to expect when building your dream home, which is another course I'm working on. It- Because once those courses are built, so the first couple of times you offer it, you're not making very much money on it. But once the course is built, it's really passive income to an extent. Even if you're doing instructor led, because then instead of, 50 or 60 hours of your time, it's an hour once a week of your time, you know.
Mhm.
Um, So been looking at how can I build more passive income streams to even out that cash flow, because it's stressful when you're making $20,000 one month and then nothing for 6 months, right?
Yes, yes.
So that's been my challenge and my desire, my goal for this year is to get that dialed in so that I can have more a passive income stream and that covers the base level of expenses, and then everything above that is just gravy.
Right. That makes sense. Is the marketing for the courses, or do you think the marketing for the courses is going to be different than the marketing that you do for your consulting?
Yeah, it's way harder. Is the all of these people like Jeff Walker and all these people who talk about email marketing and how it's great revenue to build your list and all that. They kind of gloss over how hard it is to actually build your list and to get people to show up, right? S-
Mhm.
So I honestly think B2B is a lot easier because you call up a colleague at your company, after you talk to them at a conference and they mention the problem they're having and you schedule a call with them and you're like, okay, how can I help you solve this problem? And they're like, oh, you know, I have this much budget and can you write me a proposal and then let's help me get it up, pass the business case pass through and then, you're once they've made that decision, you're doing it and you're in a project for a year, you know, or 6 months. Um the getting the butts and seats part and getting that marketing piece dialed in is very challenging. And it's a different way of thinking because, frankly, I don't want to be like the Mary Kay consultant, always bothering my friends and I don't want to sell to people, you know? I will, I want them to recognize that this is something that I'm doing to help them and not and I only want to give it to people who want it. I don't want to like be constantly nagging them about it, right? And
Mhm.
that's what the email marketing feels like to me. I have so many
Where
email.
you're constantly nagging them, or is that the way you want to go, where you're just reminding them that you're around?
Well, see, I mean, I think that's the intention, right? Is you remind them that you're around, but the effect of it when they have 50 other people also reminding them that they're around is I don't know about you, but my inbox is full of email newsletters that I will never read.
Yes, I
And
unsubscribe is my best friend.
yeah,
You know,
and then you're not being a resource, you're being a demand, right? I want to be
right,
a resource to people. I don't want to be a demand. And so it's a very delicate balancing act, especially right now. Like I know this conscious leadership course that I'm teaching would help so many people deal with their stress levels right now. And yet I can't get people to show up.
Mhm.
Or I shouldn't say I can't. I haven't figured out the magic word to get people to show up. Because I think
Right,
because there are other people who are offering similar things who are having no problem getting people in the room. So obviously I haven't quite dialed in my marketing yet. So,
right. And you haven't dialed in your messaging,
right,
and your messaging we have to understand our ideal client so well that when you say something to them, they go, wow, how does she know? She gets me. And
right.
I that is that is so hard to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've done that on the B2B side. I know exactly what kind of client I'm looking for and I know exactly what I can do for them. But when it comes to the B2C side, I haven't quite gotten that in there yet. So anybody who's thinking, oh yeah, I'll just go do some online courses and magic will happen and money will magically appear in my account and it'll be easy. I hate to break it to you, but there is no such thing as a free lunch.
Very, very, very true. Very true. Yes. I have two more questions
Okay.
as we start to wrap up. One is, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently when you started your own consulting business?
Oh, so many things. Um, well, I started my business because I got laid off and when I came home from an interview and I was crying, even though the interview went really well and I was crying because I didn't want the job and I knew they were going to offer it to me. I was like, okay, there's your sign. You need to do something else. Um, so I wasn't really prepared to be a business. You know what I'm saying? I I hadn't really intended to start my own business. I literally fell into it. So for those people who are planning to start their own business, I would say save up enough money to support yourself to at least cover your basic expenses like your mortgage and your food. Um, for 3 to 6 months because it's going to take that time to ramp up even if you get a client right away because here's the other thing, you don't get a regular paycheck, you get paid when you invoice. um so that would be one thing. The other thing I would say is dial in some of your system, do a side hustle and dial in some of your systems before it matters. You know, get your website stood up, buy your domain name, do all of that while you're still working full time. And while you still have income coming in, you need a computer or, podcasting equipment. Buy that while you're still working so that you have it when you're ready to go, right? And start practicing with it and using it, doing things, do a small project for people and see how it goes. And then, that would be the smart way to do it. But I know a lot of people just kind of go, I've had it with this company, I'm quitting, and then they start
Yeah.
the company the next day. You know, overnight successes usually take about 15 years. So,
Yes,
um,
absolutely.
so that's the biggest thing. And decide what kind of company you want. You know, if you want to have hundreds of employees, that's great. But that's a different mindset than if you want to be a solopreneur. And it's a different,
Absolutely.
you know, I knew right away that I didn't want to, that I don't mind working with subcontractors and, you know, things like that, but I didn't want to have to feed people. You know, because that's a huge responsibility. If you have a staff, you've got to make enough money, not just for yourself, but you've got to make enough money to keep them fed.
Yes. And you can't say, I'm not paying you this month because I didn't get any money in.
Exactly. Well, and that's the other thing is decide what your values are. I have a value in my company for myself of even if my client hasn't paid me, if I'm using a subcontractor, I still pay my bills. I don't, you know, but I will say that I will also say that if I have a company, if I have a client I'm working for and they don't pay me on time, I never work for them again. Oh, and that's the other thing is when in your contract, collect 10% up front.
At least 10%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
10%
I
to
would,
10% or $1,500, whatever is more.
oh,
You
and
know,
your virtual assistant is showing her face or his face.
his face. Yeah, he thinks it's dinner time and he's wrong. It's only 3 o'clock. So
But he thinks that if he's cute,
yeah, this is Yoda.
hi, Yoda. Well, on that note, thank you so much for letting me interview you today and all of your wisdom from all of your years of consulting. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a wonderful day, rest of the day today, and a great weekend this weekend.
Thank you so much for your time and for asking me to do this. It was fun. I enjoyed talking to you.
Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of Thriving Through. I hope today's conversation has given you not just inspiration, but practical, actionable insights that you can apply to your own consulting journey. Remember, building a thriving consulting practice isn't about following someone else's blueprint perfectly. It's about finding your own path and staying true to your vision while learning from those who've walked similar roads. If today's episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it. Share your biggest takeaway on LinkedIn and tag me. Leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps other independent consultants find our community and join this conversation. And don't forget to hit subscribe to ensure you never miss an episode. Each week, we'll bring you more honest conversations and practical strategies to help you build a consulting business that works for you. Until next time, keep pushing forward, stay curious, and remember, you're not just surviving in consulting, you're thriving through it.